Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our review of the USMNT's 3-0 win over Costa Rica, the second of two matches in Camp Cupcake. Yes, the non-FIFA sanction window we all love that gives us a great taste of the US players on the periphery and those who might break through. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, it's your friend, it's my friend, it's the shiny, happy Taylor Rockwell. Hello, Taylor.
I am shiny, I am happy. It is lovely to be here after the US got a win that entertained us for stretches of the game. Ryan, credit to you for watching the USMNT non-official team in a non-official window on a Wednesday evening when I'm sure you had other things to watch. Nicely done, my friend.
Thank you very much, Taylor. I have to say, you always tee me in saying how disappointing and negative it is for me to watch international soccer only because I constantly complain about it. I don't think that's fair.
Except you don't complain about these. You were happy to be here. You're happy to host them. You're still going to take your shots along the way, but I also think you know that how like intense Joe and I are about the USMNT means that maybe some jokes might be taken too far. And so you have to watch yourself. And because you watch yourself, I enjoy doing these episodes with you.
There we go. Well, I love it. International soccer is great. It's definitely as good as club soccer. Sorry, I just had someone holding me under duress. Graham Rutten's here. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. How are you? Did you enjoy this game? Did you catch all 3 goals? That's the most important thing. Or were you away doing a poo like Poch during one of them? That's definitely what happened.
Are we going with the Jason Puncheon narrative here then? That's what he did, right?
There was the wee shuffle. There was the wee. We all know what that shuffle means.
So the wee shuffle.
You're heading off to the top. Yeah, the little shuffle, not the wee shuffle. Yeah,
okay.
Different word.
And a slightly pained expression. For people who didn't watch this game or looked away in the 1 second they had this, they seem to have like a security cam bit of footage of Pochettino as the game is happening in the second half, sort of shuffling back. I think you see him go down the tunnel, you see him walk through the tunnel, and he's definitely got a shuffle going. There's definitely a pained expression. I think he was going to put in some work. Maybe that Argentine barbecue he served everybody was finally coming home to roost.
Yeah, it was.
What a wonderful way to kick off the show, by the way. This is great.
It was I found it hilarious. It was such a split-second thing that the match director clearly went, "Oh, this is an interesting shot of Pochettino going back to the dressing room to get a tactics board. Oh, wait, nope, he's going for a poo. Yep, that's what's happening there." And of course, there was Caden Clark with a Caden Clark goal that he missed. So
there we go.
So
indeed.
Spoiler alert for season 3 of Ted Lasso, 2 I think it was, in which he has the panic attack. I did for a moment wonder, is it possible that January camp is too much stress from Mauricio Pochettino? But then no, that one camera angle showed that there were other factors at play. Graham, I appreciate you leading off this episode with that.
Well, it was Graham, a cold night in Orlando, your spiritual home, of course. Poch in gloves and vest for this one. I bet maybe he went back because he couldn't believe he had to layer up once again for the cold, harsh Florida weather. Maybe it was that.
See, I've been in Orlando in February, and everyone else was all in layers and hats and big jackets, and me and my friends from Central Scotland, shorts and t-shirts. So maybe it wasn't that cold.
Maybe
I'll
not,
say this,
but
that puffy coat he had is my favorite piece of USMNT apparel I've seen in quite some time. It was it was a navy puffy vest with kind of reddish sleeves, not the bright red, but a little bit of a darker red. I enjoyed that one. I want that gear soon.
$200 from USSoccerStore.com, I bet.
I'm 100% with you, Taylor. In fact, I've recently been trying to shop for a vest. I wanted a North Face one, but they're $300. I'm not going to do that. So maybe I'll have a look and pay $298 in the US Soccer Store for that one instead. Massive
That's the way to go.
Discount there. That is the way to do it. But yeah, cold night in Orlando. The field looked a little bit non-league, as did some of the soccer. We can get into that as well. But we had goals here, as noted by Taylor there, from Montreal's Caden Clark, but not before Vancouver's Brian White. And of course, the third goal from the man, the myth, the legend, Patrick Adjumang of Charlotte FC, with a banger from an acute angle. Yes, indeed. The result handing former Mexico boss Miguel Herrera his first loss in his first match since taking over this here job as well. So some narrative there perhaps too. Taylor, would you set the table with your initial impressions of this game? You mentioned sporadic moments of entertainment that you got here.
Yeah, I think to start off, I was surprised by the lineup. We talked about this in the review and then the kind of slight preview we did for USMNT Weekly, just that I thought we might see a similar starting 11 or a lot of the same names because it's an opportunity to prove that you can do it over multiple games, to prove that you kind of belong in the considerations, and I think to prove that you have risen to the expected level in training. Instead, we got a number of changes. I forget exactly how many, but it was plenty, including along the back line. I did not think think we would get Tim Ream or Walker Zimmerman starting this game. Maybe Walker Zimmerman if I had to guess. Instead, it was both of them and Miles Robinson in what I saw as just a more conventional back three. I think at times defensively it was more of a 4-5-1, strangely, with DeJuan Jones dropping in. But it felt to me like a more straight-up back three. It felt like more a central two up top with Gutierrez starting alongside White. But Gutierrez, I think, had a lot of license to roam around and do as he wanted. Diego Luna kind of functioning as the number 10, the playmaker centrally. And then also Diego Luna being the one to kind of trigger the press, initiate the press when Costa Rica would try to build out of their goal kicks. There were a lot of little wrinkles and a lot of little adjustments that made me really interested in this game. And I thought it was a fascinating one for maybe the opening 30 minutes and then a very enjoyable game for the final 20 or so, and in between, slightly rougher viewing.
I certainly didn't expect to see Zach Steffen starting in goal for this game. Poor Matt Friese, the only player in the entire squad not to get any game time over these two matches, which is a shame because he was one of the players coming into this camp that I kind of wanted to see have a go in the team. But I was surprised to see Steffen. I was also surprised to see Miles Robinson at right back, which obviously then made more sense when the game kicked off. And as you say, Taylor, that was more of a back three with Jones kind of pushing into central midfield. I actually quite liked that setup. We got Anelli starting in central midfield, which was something I said after the Venezuela game I wanted to see. We didn't get Aguiman from the start, which is what I wanted. We got Brian White, but it worked out fine because both centre forwards scored anyway. So yeah, it was a nice game and a nice camp for the US in general, I thought.
Yeah, Aguiman coming on as a sub to score is his natural habitat, so don't worry about that, Graham. That's what he's all about. Formation-wise, Graham, was how different, if at all, was this from the Venezuela game? We mentioned sort of a top two here in this game.
Yeah, so Gutierrez obviously is a player who likes to come central. He was doing that with Brian White, but I thought the biggest difference was what we've already kind of outlined with the defence, with that back three. Obviously, you take Max Arson out of that back line. It's Jones that comes in the left side. I thought that was a big difference in terms of how Jones was pushing into central midfield. We talked on Tuesday's USMNT weekly episode about how George Campbell, or maybe it was Monday's episode, I can't quite remember, but how George Campbell was doing this kind of, this is the wrong term, but inverted centre-back act of coming into the middle. It feels like Jones was the player. Poch clearly wanted to do something along those lines, and he decided that DeJuan Jones was the player to do that in this game. So what that then allowed was to create a double pivot this is in possession, of course, not against the ball, where it was more of a back four. But that allowed Anelli or McGlynn to drop in or stay in that deep position alongside Jones, so it's a double pivot, and then pass one of them on forward so the US could get into nice advanced areas. I quite like that. I quite like that setup. I thought it worked well for the US.
Yeah, and Taylor, we mentioned obviously Ream and Zimmerman in the back here. We also touched on the idea of doing that in the first game of Camp Cupcake. What do we learn from doing that, though? I don't quite understand the utility of putting them together in a game like this.
The only thing I'll say, and this is speculation, I would love to hear Joe's thoughts later on when he is back in the country. He is en route back to the United States at present, having spent his last couple of days recording in Paris. Very generous of him to spend his time talking about the USMNT and listener questions and all that good stuff. But I do wonder if this was maybe Pochettino wanting to see what the U.S. could do in just a more straight-up back three, at least in possession and in attack. And so he went with maybe the more veteran players in that role because it is asking them to do a little bit of a different job than he has previously asked players to do, which is maybe how DeJuan Jones gets utilized here. Instead of kind of like throwing in Shaq Moore, throwing in Arfston again, it's kind of giving him a more specialized role, and I think he did well in it. That is kind of my assumption, is that he wanted to see what the U.S. could do with a different look, how quickly they could adapt, and I think how much more control they could have in a game. And I think this was designed to get more players forward, to get more pressing happening, to kind of win the ball back higher up the pitch. I think they did a lot of that, as I said, in those opening 30 minutes, and then sporadically throughout the game. And I thought the wingbacks in this situation of DeJuan Jones and Indiana Vassilev were key to both sides of the ball, giving them width, giving them passing options, giving them central passing options in Jones's case, but then still making overlaps on the left. There wasn't enough of that, according to Pochettino at halftime. He wanted more attacks down the left, so maybe Jones had to get even more involved in the second half. Similarly, it sounded like he thought that maybe Kremasky was... I couldn't tell if it was a criticism, but he basically said Kremasky was focused on the defensive side of things. We've brought on Jack McGlynn to do more offensive things. And so maybe he just wanted a bit more control, a bit more proactive control in this game from the U.S. And I think starting some more veterans helped him kind of do that earlier and more successfully.
I didn't catch that halftime interview, Taylor. That's interesting.
I didn't either.
I
It was a
thought...
Melissa Ortiz talking head thing that you
right.
enjoy
Okay.
so much.
I must have been. Yeah, I love those segments. I find that interesting because I actually thought the rotations between Jones and Getty on the left side were working quite well. Where one of them would come centrally, that would create the space for someone to go out wide, and then Luna would come into that space as well. And I kind of thought, I sort of disagree with Poch in that. I thought that was one of the positives from the first half. And the first place to start for me with this game and looking at the difference from the last match, the Venezuela match, was I just liked the intensity and the energy that the US had for large stretches of this match. There was a stretch in the second half and towards the end of the first half as well, where the ball wasn't moving as quickly as I would have liked, and the levels dropped, and the competitive tension maybe dropped out of the game as well in those moments. But you could see Poch's fingerprints on this team, and the way that they were set, their line of confrontation was set really high up the pitch. The US forced a number of high turnovers, including for the second goal where Anelli wins it high up and then cuts it back for Caden Clark inside the box. So that is the most positive thing for me, because it says that Poch is instilling a set of principles that will hopefully seep into the senior team as well. There's a consistency in the messaging there from Poch that I like.
Yep, and I think with that consistency is also maybe a simplicity, because I think in January camps past, when you have new players coming in, and Greg Berhalter has a specific style he wants to play that maybe some would say was overly convoluted, I think you could see players kind of struggling to adapt, struggling to understand their responsibilities, and especially in critical positions in the center of midfield, maybe as that number 9, in terms of what you're supposed to do and when. And I think you'd see a lot more dialogue and frustrated dialogue at that with January camp players. And this one, I do think there was maybe more simplicity in the approach and in the instructions given. It's why we didn't see Poch up off of his seat nearly as much. I don't think he is as proactive, or maybe that's the wrong way to put it. But
for that as well.
Yeah, maybe it was the shuffle into the locker room midway through the game. But I do feel like he kind of gives instructions, and at least with this team in this game, I saw more of him kind of wanting to see who figured it out and who did what was expected of them and who sort of understood from the jump. And that's what you want to see in these camps, is younger players or less experienced, less proven players come in and then justify that inclusion and then justify continued inclusion theoretically. And I think to kind of have a new look and still have players perform well, even if there are the dull patches, I think speaks volumes about what he has been able to communicate so far and about how much buy-in he is getting.
Definitely so. Graham, you mentioned some of those Poch hallmarks. I think it's fair to say that Costa Rica was slightly more, had a bit more fortitude about them than Venezuela, got forward a bit more, had a few more chances, tested Zach Steffen in this game. Is there anything for concern in the way that Costa Rica were able to push forward and maybe get behind a couple of times? But concern that might carry over to the full first team?
No, I wouldn't say so. I actually thought in the first half the US did a pretty good job of guarding against those moments, and I contrasted it to the Venezuela game where Poch at halftime said some of their shape and defensive transition was a little bit off in that match. I thought having Jones in that central area, and obviously when it was set possession, when Costa Rica were in set possession, it was a back four and Jones would go back to left back. But when we're talking about those defensive transition areas, having Jones in the centre I thought was a really good guard. And Anelli as well, because Anelli he was putting out fires, he was covering a lot of ground, so he's a different type of profile of player to Jack McGlynn, who he obviously replaced in that central midfield. So I actually have no concerns really over that. And I think if that was the case in the second half, I think that's surely just down to competitive tension coming out of the game, some of the changes being made by Poch as well, disrupting the team. I think it said something that the last 20 minutes of this game and the first 20 minutes of this game were the best periods of the match for the US. That's where they score the goals, because they're not disrupting things so much. So I'm really not that concerned about anything that I saw in this game. A couple of individual performers I thought didn't take their... Yeah, sure, Taylor.
If you don't mind, because the only thing I'll say that I had as a consistent negative is I felt like once the lead was established and maybe once Costa Rica didn't respond with trying to punch in the mouth, trying to go out and be aggressive, I thought the U.S. maybe just got a little too comfortable, and so a number of the chances Costa Rica had, not the first Zach Steffen full stretch save, but the second one, which is a truly insane save that he pulls off to have the reach he does, the lift he does to make a save that he has no business making. But it starts with Jack McGlynn basically just being really slow on the ball and getting caught and assuming there's going to be a foul, and there wasn't. And that was a recurring thing multiple times in this game, was players expecting the whistle to go. CONCACAF's going to be a little bit more physical, and I think you've got to respond to that. So you had players getting knocked off the ball, I would say, too easily on occasion, and you had players just giving the ball away when they didn't need to, either on the dribble or with sort of cheap passes or lazy passes that didn't go where they were intended or didn't go as far as they were intended. And a number of Costa Rica counterattacks come from U.S. basically giving the ball away in the center of the pitch, even if it's in a more advanced position. I do think that is a thing that Pochettino is going to want to cut down drastically, because that is when you are most vulnerable, when you are open and attacking and then give the ball away with acres of space behind you. That would be the one thing that I saw kind of routinely, and Anelli was part of that. I suspect Graham and I are going to have differing thoughts on Anelli's individual performance, but I think a number of U.S. players were maybe a bit too slow on the ball on the evening.
Are you also subtweeting Jack McGlynn with some of those comments, Taylor? When he comes on the second half, some of his passing was a little bit errant, and that's an interesting point on Jack McGlynn. Is he better starting matches when he can grow into the game and get his passing rhythm than coming off the bench? I don't have enough evidence, but I'm kind of floating that theory on Jack McGlynn. But yeah, there was definitely a period in this game where things got a little bit ragged and a little bit loose for the US.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll dig a little bit more into some of the individual performances. We'll look ahead to the next window and much more. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our USMNT Costa Rica review. Let's take a look at some of the individual performances. Taylor, Diego Luna, of course, featuring in this game, looking like Jared Leto in Fight Club in that scene where he got a good beat down.
Looking like he'd been playing.
Yay, Jared Leto getting beaten. Yeah,
he looked like he'd been playing indoor soccer with Milhavich, I think is.
Yeah, that's a better analogy. Yeah, very good. It was the bleached hair that got me. Anyway, Taylor, what do we make of Luna in this performance? Pretty encouraging.
Yep, he was one who I said after the first game I wanted to see start, because we knew he could do it and look confident and play clever balls and do little flicks and tricks against teams that were already beaten. Could he do it against an international caliber opponent from the jump? And I think last night he proved that he could. He does pick up, we're assuming, a broken nose, and yet still dishes out the assist for the opening goal. And I think the way it's not like he has a ton of pressure on him. I don't think he has anybody within 20 yards of him when he receives that ball. But so often we've talked about midfielders for the U.S. not being fast enough, not being decisive enough in sort of turning and attacking. And sometimes it's a square ball to make sure that possession is retained. Sometimes it's kind of looking for the safer passes. And I like that Luna receives that ball on the turn, drives forward with it, and is definitely telling Brian White where to run. Like, as he's dribbling, you can see him saying, make the run, make the run. Brian White does. It's a perfectly weighted pass in for him. And to Brian White's credit, it's an amazing first touch to set up the second touch, which is the shot. He has a couple other opportunities throughout the game where maybe that first touch isn't quite as sharp, including one big one in the second half that he's unable to convert. But in this one, he does great to convert, but it is the setup there from Diego Luna, who I thought was exactly what I wanted to see for like the first 35 minutes or so. I think, as with most players, he kind of tails off a little bit. His influence is less, and then he comes out at halftime, I think, because of that injury. But is sort of leading by example, is playing simple, but then trying stuff when I felt like the situation was appropriate for him to try stuff. And then, as I alluded to in the introduction, I thought it was really interesting that when Costa Rica would have a goal kick or when they'd kind of build from deeper, you would usually see the nominal front two of Brian Gutierrez and Brian White, the Bryans, if we want to go that way. They would sort of be the two furthest up the pitch, but very spread. And I think that was to kind of maybe make it less of an obvious pass to one of the center backs. They're kind of in the area between the center backs and the fullbacks, so like it's all kind of cut off there. And then it would be Diego Luna who would come charging out and sort of cut off half the pitch, make the goalkeeper go to one side, and then close the rest of the pitch accordingly. And multiple times that either led to just a ball kicked down the field because Costa Rica couldn't pass anymore. Other times it led to them just passing it straight out of bounds because they were willing to concede a throw-in because they were about to lose possession. And I thought Diego Luna on the defensive side of things was a pleasant surprise. I was expecting him to do attacking things. I didn't think he would do as much pressing and leading by example, and he did, so I was very happy.
He was the main character of this game in every single way. He has the iconic image of this match with the cotton stuffed up his nose, and I love that whole sequence from Diego Luna where he just looks absolutely miserable with a broken nose. It would have been very easy for him to just come off at that point. And then you've got Poch putting the shirt back on Diego Luna to come back on the pitch, and then within moments he's created the assist for and this is not one of the assists that Joe rails against. This was very much a Diego Luna created goal. And he creates the space. There's a little fake step that he takes to push the Costa Rican fullback, I think it is, at that point, away from him. So yeah, he's in acres of space, but he does something to create that space. And I just thought there was a lot to suggest that when he is on it, he can give the US a little bit, something extra, a different dimension. As you say, Taylor, I like the tempo that he plays at. I like how quickly he moves forward. He did that for the goal. There is a moment like 2 minutes after the goal where he's in a similar situation and he has, I think, a runner on either side. He maybe has White ahead of him as well. It's a 3-on-3 or maybe even a 4-on-3 in favour of the US. And he gets caught in about 10 different minds and it's a tame pass into the defender. So there's still moments for him to refine and tidy up. But I really like his profile. And even though he only gets 45 minutes in this game, I have to imagine that Poch was impressed with what he saw as well.
Graham, that moment that you're talking about where he kind of ends up playing a pretty weak pass, I was really confused by that because it did seem in the moment like he basically just had too many options to play through, wasn't sure, and ended up kind of half choosing the wrong one at the end. I think in the commentary, they noted that the goalkeeper was off his line, and it seems like maybe Luna for a moment thought, I could have a go here and try to chip him from 35 out. And then I think thought better of it, but maybe that's why he was in 3 different minds instead of just the 2, maybe even 4 minds. He's talented. He's in a multiverse of his own.
Those who are watching on YouTube, we're on YouTube, by the way, may have noticed my baffled face a few moments ago. 2 helicopters flew quite low over my house just then. They didn't even land on my helipad, so I don't know what they were doing here. But
you were starting to not pay attention about a USMNT review, and they knew, Ryan, and so now your attention is back in. You're focused. Darn. Otherwise, there will be consequences.
They're always the first to know, the helicopters, aren't they? It's crazy.
They're about to break in that door behind you.
Maybe so. We'll see. Check it out on YouTube anyway. Graham, Jack McGlynn, maybe was he the main character of the first game, the Venezuela game? Maybe not quite so much in this one as you touched on previously.
Yeah, I mean, him and Patrick Guyman, of course, were the standout stars from that first game. I just felt like he never really got into his passing rhythm when he came on the pitch, and maybe that was just down to the fact that the US at that point were. I thought there was a period towards the end of the game where you've got players coming in off the bench wanting to make an impression, and the US were, I thought, particularly transition heavy in those last 20 minutes. You see the moment from Aguiman. You've got his goal, of course, which he takes so brilliantly. It's like a hammer finish, and the ball from Jones as well with the outside of the boot is superb. But there's also a moment down the left wing for Aguiman where he dummies the defender and he gets the US moving forward on that side. Probably should have prodded it through to Miljevic in that moment. So I don't know whether that phase of the game didn't suit Jack McGlynn, who maybe wants to build the game a little bit deeper. I'm kind of airing theories here, but you're right, Ryan. He was a level down on what we saw in that Venezuela match. But just broadly speaking, I still think his skill set with his passing range and his left foot has something to offer the US. So I still come out of this camp. I'm maybe skipping ahead in our discussion here, but I still come out of this camp with his stock up, I think.
I would agree with that, and I think to jump to that one for a moment, I think part of what I want in giving a player stock up, stock down evaluations is sort of knowing what they did well, but then also knowing areas in which they can improve. And if McGlynn is brought on to facilitate additional attacks, I feel like for the first 15 minutes of the second half, he is not doing that. And as I said, he is the one who gives the ball away that leads to the Zach Steffen save. He's the one who picks up the yellow card for the dive that didn't seem like it was a dive until it was definitely a dive. But the biggest thing I think from this performance is that I think Costa Rica, Ryan, to your point, maybe weren't quite as standoffish as Venezuela, were more physical, certainly, but then also did try to press on occasion, did try to make the U.S. uncomfortable. And I think if you're McGlynn subbing into this game, you might expect it to be a somewhat slower pace. Maybe your opposition is standing off a bit more, as Venezuela were. And so to kind of get punched in the nose, basically, not the Diego Luna way, but the other way, it requires a response. And I'm not sure McGlynn fully responded. I don't feel like after the first couple moments when he is caught in possession or tackled or just loses possession that he really responds to it by being faster and more efficient. But I think now we have an understanding of he can do it in this situation, but against a team that's going to press and be more physical. Now we want to see how he responds in the next game and in the next opportunity he's given. And so we know if he continues to play in that way, then maybe we do have an understanding of his ceiling right now. But I think before we didn't know what we didn't know, now we know what we do know.
Yes. That is a thing. We're going to do some stock up, stock down later on in this episode, so stay tuned for that. But a couple more players to spotlight. Taylor, how about 2025's all-time US top scorer? 2 goals in 2 games. Patrick Agyemang. Any more notes on him?
Other than I think we need to, not we, but this is the second straight game where they're like, he brings something different, which I think is a way of saying he's a big guy who is fast, but can also pass a ball. Like, it's great that he can do that. Yeah. It's less of a, like, he has a skill set unlike anything any other number 9 has in this pool, which is basically saying he can play with his feet, but he's tall. Is that what we're saying here? But it's accurate. It is true. I think it just needs to be less of a surprise at this point. But that dummy that Graham mentioned where he then drives in on goal, I can't remember if he gets a shot off of that one or maybe it's blocked for a corner. But that sequence I really enjoyed because it does sort of spring a surprise out of nowhere at a time when I think the U.S. was just being a little more complacent. They were being a little bit more slow in their build. That's a reminder that he can alone spark an attack.
Yeah.
And then the finish for the goal. I still don't know if Jones is playing the ball for him or for somebody else on that left side. But it doesn't matter because Adjumang gets on the end of it, finishes it perfectly, and this is where I would agree with the commentators. I don't think it was just an opportunistic finish. I don't think he just gets lucky or it's bad goalkeeping. I think he knows his angles. He knows where he needs to hit the ball and how he needs to hit the ball to make sure at the very least it's on frame and causes problems, and he does both of those things from a difficult angle after making a smart run. I think it's another thumbs-up performance for Adjumang.
Yeah. I wanted to see him start. I said that earlier in the week. I wanted to see if he could back it up from the first game. But I kind of wonder if, actually in hindsight, the way that he played coming off the bench, I kind of wonder if it's more impactful in terms of his senior team chances to have come off the bench and made an impact like that against a tiring team where his explosiveness just gives the US a little boost for the last 20 minutes of that game, because that's kind of the role. Nobody expects Patrick Aguiman to start in 2026. Even if he scores 20 goals in MLS this season, that's just not going to happen. Maybe he is a role player off the bench who does what he did in this game. And so I kind of wonder if seeing those different looks from him might actually help his senior team chances. Just a little theory that I had.
Oh, interesting that you don't think if Aguiman leads Charlotte all the way to MLS Cup with Will Zaha giving him the service he so richly deserves all the way, that he won't be in consideration for 2026. Interesting theory, Graham. Okay, we'll see how that one pans out.
Start.
It's
Wando did that for years and years and years, and he was always off the bench at major tournaments, which is regretful in some sense. From
Fair enough.
When was that? 2014.
And Wando carries no baggage at all with USMNT supporters. I think if Adjumang were to score 20 goals, it's been a while since we had an American score 20 goals in Major League Soccer. I do wonder if that would get him maybe further up the depth chart. At the very least, these two performances, I think, will keep him in Pochettino's good graces, even if he's not second or third on the depth chart. I think he might continue to get looks if a player is injured, if a player can't go. I think he'll probably be the emergency call-in to camp, and then he can continue to justify that.
Yeah. Graham, you expressed earlier on some surprise that Zach Steffen was featuring in this game. Is it I mean, I think we should probably give him some flowers for the performance, first of all, but
sure.
Is there a theory maybe that Poch has seen he's had a bit of negative PR, shall we say, recently and needed a bit of a boost and he got it in this game?
A bit of man management, yeah. I mean that is potentially a valid theory. And Zach Steffen has had a lot of criticism on this show from some of us. Like, I was certainly one of the people who didn't really see the point of not just playing Zach Steffen, but calling him into this camp. So you said he deserves his flowers, Ryan. I would agree with that largely because of the two saves he makes. The first one from Brannan and the second one from Alan Cruz, both big time stops. I also thought it sounded like there was good communication between him and the back line. He had decent authority in the penalty box as well. I will pull back slightly on the distribution side of things because I still thought there were some ragged. I mean, he was fine. And with Zach Steffen, sometimes I wonder if we're kind of over-analysing him because of that Man City move, and we all thought, is he really a Pep Guardiola goalkeeper? But there were still some ragged moments. Anytime he had to bypass the defence into the midfield, it wasn't great. There was a couple of wayward passes, but still I thought this was a positive reintroduction for Zach Steffen. And behind Matt Turner, it's kind of just a blob at the moment with the goalkeeper. So I really wouldn't rule out him being second choice for 2026. That opportunity is still there for him.
Very good. T-Rock, any more individual performances you want to spotlight, or should we press on?
I think we should talk about Emeka Eneli for a moment. I think we'll probably get to him in stock up, stock down as well. He gets an assist in this game. We know Joe loves that stat. I think is the highest rated player for the U.S. on FOTMob. And that makes him more of a conundrum for me, because I think on the one hand I saw lots of positive things from him. Then I just saw a lot of giveaways, a lot of moments where you could see the rough edges. And I think I'm inclined to still give him the favorable treatment, the favorable analysis of We know what he can do well. We know how he can fit into the team. Now we need to see how he can improve, or how you can sort of accentuate the strengths and minimize the vulnerabilities. But for every time I have him making a smart pass or winning the ball back high or making a good interception, there are moments of him being caught in possession, of him trying to dribble and getting robbed of possession or just getting tackled, or of him passing the ball sort of errantly, sometimes in the attack, sometimes in the build-out. And I think that kind of erratic nature of his distribution wasn't a thing that I expected to see, because so much of the hype around him has been about how good he is on the ball, how he's a very secure sort of like ball player. His passing stats are still above 90% in terms of accuracy. But there just were enough moments for me of him getting caught, or of him sort of making loose passes that either he then has to kind of go in, win the ball back aggressively, and then like keep possession going from there, which he sometimes does. But also times when he would just sort of give it away and allow Costa Rica to alleviate pressure in. And I think in closer games, you can't really afford those types of giveaways. So that would be my drawback on him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly warmer on his performance than it seems you are, Taylor, but I accept the point that in possession, he seems very raw, which for a 25-year-old is not ideal. Like, he's not especially young, Emeka Eneli. Like, he's coming into his peak years. You would hope those things had been ironed out of his game, and obviously he's been a right back that's been moved into central midfield, so a lot of this stuff is new to him in terms of being a rhythm builder within a team. But nonetheless, I liked what he offered alongside Cremaschi in the midfield double pivot. I feel like he's suited to that role. With Cremaschi, there's obviously still the question of whether he's more of an 8 than a 6. But I thought Eneli, out of possession, covered maybe some of the flaws in Cremaschi's game, where he's putting out fires. The thing that I really liked about Emeka Eneli, which I haven't really seen from another US player in the pool in that position, is he has that Ryan Gravenberch trick of being able to drop a shoulder and roll an opponent and get a team moving forward. I've got them noted down here because they were notable when I was watching this game. There was a really nice one in the 14th minute, and the Costa Rican defender completely fell for it, hook, line and sinker, and Eneli was away forward and the US were moving forward in quick transition. There was another one that maybe wasn't quite as clean in the 38th minute, but still served the purpose of taking the ball with his back to a player, rolling them and getting the US moving forward. So I really like that quality. I like his profile as a player as well. But you're right, Taylor, there are some things that he needs to refine if he's to be a serious part of the pool. Of course, it's such an area of competition for the US as well. It's the most stacked part of the squad. So I think his stock is up. I think he's part of the discussion, but he's still a way down the pecking order. You'd be talking about a number of injuries to key players before you got to Eneli.
I think a good indicator of his overall performance in my notes is 75th minute, Eneli with another unforced error. 77th minute, Eneli wins the ball high, cuts back cleverly to a wide-open Caden Clark for the goal. Pochettino in the toilet. And then 80th minute, Eneli with another errant giveaway. And so it's like unforced error. I think that the first one he's caught in possession. Then it's great work to win the ball. It's a great pass to set up the goal. And then it's an errant pass to give possession away. I think it was that sort of erratic nature of his performance that had me a little bit confused, but still overall positive.
All right, very good stuff. We'll take one more quick break. When we come back, we're going to play a game of stock up, stock down for this entire January camp. We're going to look forward to the CONCACAF Nations League finals coming up in March and much more. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our USMNT review. By the way, ladies and gents, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is where you can support us if you choose to do so. Bonus episodes and videos and access to our Discord server where all the cool kids are talking USMNT 24/7 or thereabouts. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show to support us. Not far off. It's a good time.
I do genuinely love the Discord during USMNT games and camps. I spent, rather than sitting on Twitter, which I try not to do at all these days, I will sit in the USMNT channel in the TSS Discord. That's a good place to be during games.
There you go. An impartial view on the Discord from Graham Ruthven there. Very good indeed. Graham, let's do some stock up, stock down, shall we, for Camp Cupcake in general. Why don't we start with a stock up, stock down on Camp Cupcake itself? Are we feeling it was a good one in the pantheon of January windows?
I thought it was a fun camp. Like, these two games were positive. We saw Pochettino's ability to instill consistent principles on a different group of players, which I think is impressive and says something about his coaching ability, and hopefully the US have got the right guy. And there were a handful of players who came out of it as players you could envisage making that step up to the senior team. Now, that's not to say that nobody is coming out of this camp as a nailed-on starter. Patrick Aguiman, as good as he did, is not the starting striker in March if Ricardo Pepe is fit or Balogun is fit. But nonetheless, they're part of the discussion now in a way that they weren't before this camp, and that's kind of the purpose of this camp. So I certainly think it was worthwhile.
Yeah, Taylor, you concur?
Yep, absolutely. I really enjoyed getting to see a different group of players that I've seen maybe less of, certainly less of with the USMNT, but then seeing what they did under Pochettino and the Pochettino-ness of it all made it very exciting.
It did indeed. Taylor, let's start with the players whose stock has gone up. Where would you like to begin this?
I would like to begin with Brian Gutierrez. We've talked about a few other players. I think I'm stock up largely on Jack McGlynn, Diego Luna, of the ones we've already discussed, and Ajimang, certainly. Brian Gutierrez is one that I said after the first game I wanted to rewatch, and when I did, I saw more of him doing subtle things, including his set-piece delivery. And then in this game, I really enjoyed him, even if he comes out, I believe, at halftime. I'm assuming that was like a minutes management sort of thing. But again, his set-piece delivery, he was the one taking the corners from the left side for the U.S., and then I think it was Vasilev taking them from the other side. But his sort of near-post delivery was on point. His delivery into the center of the box was also very good. And then it felt like he was content to take people on, content to make like kind of risky passes, but then also make smart decisions in attack. I thought defensively he worked really hard and knew his assignment. And he has that like lean back upright posture speed that I did not expect. He has really good acceleration, then he has really good kind of top flight speed. He's quicker than I expected him to be. So he was one, I think because I was less familiar with him going into this camp or had very little familiarity with him. I think to see how well he played was a pleasant surprise. I am definitely stock up on Brian Gutierrez.
There is an intelligence to his play, isn't there? Like in terms of his movement and even the way that some of the decisions that he makes, which are not always the perfect decision. I think he's a young player, and that's always the thing with young players, is the sort of the thing that comes last is the decision making. But some of the passes he was making in those rotations with I mentioned with Jones and with Luna, I think you need some positional intelligence to perform those. But I still feel like I think he's stock up for me as well. I still feel like he's maybe a little bit young in his development. He's still fledgling. I feel like I want him to play with more personality. I want him to properly drive at a player and force defenders to make decisions, and that's kind of the next part of his development. But technically, and in terms of his game intelligence, yeah, I liked what I saw.
Very nice. Graham, who else who has stock who you're glad you're still holding that's going up?
So I'll give you my 4. So Aguiman is an obvious one. We've talked about his kind of unique skill set in the player pool. Has got a turn of pace, physically imposing, can dribble. I think works well in quick transition. We saw him make an impact off the bench. So I think everyone who watched these two games would agree that Patrick Aguiman is stock up. Jack McGlynn as well. I really like his passing range. Gives you that option for quick switches, which I can imagine with Christian Pulisic playing in either wing, or Timothy Whale would be really useful as well if he's in the senior team. Also feels like he's at and Joe referenced this in the USMNT Weekly episode, maybe at a crossroads in his career, a jumping off point where there's a move to Europe coming, and so it'd be good to integrate him now so that when that growth comes in Europe, he's used to the camp. Diego Luna has been mentioned. One of the things I love about Diego Luna is it never feels like he goes missing in games. He plays with, I said, with Gutierrez, I want him to play with more personality. I feel like Diego Luna does that. He plays with personality. I want to see him against a top-level opponent, so actually I would not be against him being called into the March camp, and when it's a higher level of opposition, and see how he imposes himself on those sort of teams. And then Emeka Anelli, I know that there's a bit of a difference of opinion here, but I like his profile. He's a good ball carrier. Problem for him is obviously how stacked the midfield is. Taylor, can I ask you about a player you mentioned? You were talking about Gutierrez as a winger there. Can I talk about the player who was on the other wing for the Costa Rica game?
You can try.
Well, that's my point. Indiana Vasilev. Great name, by the way. But I was just so very underwhelmed by him. It's not that his stock is down, because I didn't know a massive amount about him, certainly in a US context coming into this game, but just found him a bit underwhelming, a little bit anonymous, not really imposing himself in the game. What did you make of him?
I would agree, which is why I had him in stock down. Not because he did anything necessarily wrong, but I think because this is an opportunity against weaker opposition to show that you can handle that, so you can then handle the next obstacle. And I think Vasilev was fine, but I don't think elevated to the extent that now we want to see that same level of challenge like we want to see with maybe Diego Luna in March, to your point, Graham. I also thought, like, as I said, he's taking corners on the other side, and there's the one. It just stood out to me that Gutierrez puts his on the near post, and it's Tim Ream with the little flick that almost leads to a wide open shooting opportunity.
That was nice,
it's
yeah.
a great design set piece. They tried to do it on the other side, and it's sort of behind Ream and too high. And then the interesting thing, I watched this so many times I could not understand what happened.
Ream's reaction, is it? Are you going to talk
Yes. Yes. Ream, I think of as being a very, he's the elder statesman. You don't see him rattled too much. I don't feel like he's a very emotional guy. And yet, you see him look over, and it's clear that maybe not Gutierrez, maybe Vasilev said something, but Ream yells at him in a that was not good enough sort of way. And I was like, are they joking? Did they run it a bunch? They were not joking. So that was just an interesting little moment of I don't see Tim Ream get mad at people very often, certainly not off of set piece delivery. So maybe that's the demanding level they're now playing at, or maybe that was just a one-off moment. But either way, that stood out to me.
Yeah.
Graham, it sounds like you noted that too.
Yes, and I thought when Vasilev came off in the second half, he was visibly disappointed, which says to me that even he knows he's not going to get. I mean, he'll probably get another opportunity, at least if he keeps up his club form in MLS. He'll get another opportunity in the next January camp, but before then, he's not getting another call up. And he kind of, his look said to me he recognised that this was a missed opportunity.
He had that kind of air, I think, multiple times when you'd see him in close-up during the game. He just kind of looked like, this isn't going the way I wanted it to. Again, not that it was poor. I just think maybe he wasn't as involved in the attack as he would have liked to have been. I don't think he gets as many opportunities. And then, for people who are new to CONCACAF, this was I loved this CONCACAF moment of him in the 61st minute. He chops down Mora. It's definitely denying a counterattack. It definitely should have been a yellow and was not given as a yellow, just given as a foul. And in that moment in my notes, I was like, oh, well, that's a green light for Costa Rica. Someone's getting stomped. And 3 minutes later, it's Milhevic gets stomped on. So that was, at the very least from Vasilev, an introduction to newbies of CONCACAF of when that doesn't get given as a yellow, there is going to be a physical retribution for that tackle. And there was only minutes later. So at least he brought that to the table, Graham.
If you are newbies to CONCACAF, by the way, and this was your entry point, it gets better. Don't worry. Let's stick around. Is the message I would give to you for that. Not to be too negative on this window, of course. But why don't we get a bit negative, though, Taylor? Mm-hmm. Whose stock has gone down, do we think?
I think Benjamin Kremeski, similar to Vasilev, I don't think was poor necessarily. I don't think I really noted a lot of what he did. It sounds like maybe he was meant to be more defensive or ended up playing more defensively by that halftime quote from Poch. To me, I don't have significant notes on him. I don't remember much other than he was caught on the ball, and I think it ends up being a foul in the first 5 minutes, but it didn't look like a foul. It looked like he was just very slow, and I think that was kind of maybe a statement for the rest of the game. So Kremeski is one that I am sort of stock neutral to down on. Miles Robinson, I don't think I'm stock down on, but I think I'm exactly where I was before, which is we know what he is going to bring, which is athleticism for sure. He has the tackle in the first minute of extra time of the first half when he is the one basically to get back to slide in and block a very good shooting opportunity. That is his athleticism. That is his speed. That's his ability to kind of read a situation on the fly. On the flip side, the second Stefan save, that is a very, very good save, it is Jack McGlynn giving the ball away, but it's then the U.S. just sort of all crowding to one side, and everyone fully ball watching, Miles Robinson chief among them, and it's his man who is wide open at the back post, and Robinson is completely unaware that there are actually two Costa Rican players back there. And I think that is the downside to Miles Robinson that we've talked about before, is situational awareness is great when he is maybe adapting to an improvised moment on the fly, but when the game requires him to kind of read everything that's happening, process a ton of information while things are developing a bit more slowly, I'm not sure that is where he is at his strongest. Or, if anything, I am sure that is not where he is at his strongest, because that's where I feel like we've seen issues in his game in the past. I don't have many notes on his distribution, but I think he is one where I'm sort of stock neutral in that I went into this kind of having an idea of who he was, and I come out of this having that same idea.
Graham, who's stock down for you?
So taking this over the two games, Shaq Moore, I think, is stock down. Or stock, I mean, this is the thing with Shaq Moore. I don't want to be too negative on Shaq Moore. It's maybe just like stock neutral on Shaq Moore, because we already knew what Shaq Moore is,
Nodding.
and I
Nodding.
just didn't like his performance against Venezuela. I thought he was pretty negative with his lack of progressive passing, and that might not have mattered against Costa Rica if he was in the back three, because I didn't think it was really on Miles Robinson to really be punching those passes forward, but it did feel like, obviously, the setup was slightly different against Venezuela, and I thought it limited the US down that right side. So Shaq Moore, wasn't really impressed with him. We've already covered Indiana Vassilev, didn't take the opportunity, works hard, but a lack of actual productivity. I think stock down on Max Arston, which he was one of the players I was most looking forward to seeing in this January camp. I think that's why I have him stock down. I'm not writing him off or anything. I would like to have another look at him in maybe a future January camp. But as I say, he was one of the players I was looking forward to. I really liked him for the Columbus Crew. I just thought he was a bit tentative with some of his passing in the Venezuela game. Didn't really give the US an outlet down that left side. And then was pretty thoroughly outshone by Jones starting in the Costa Rica game. Now, I know his role is slightly different, but nonetheless, if you're to compare the two left-sided defenders, which of the two played their role better, it was quite clearly DeJuan Jones in the Costa Rica game. So yeah, I think Arston I was a little bit disappointed with.
Graham, any thoughts on Milhevic?
Haha, that's the $1 million question. I mean, I think you can split it up into a number of different ways. He made a very bad first impression because his first half performance against Venezuela was horrific. I saw Doyle posting on Blue Sky like, is this the worst ever player to have played for the US? I don't think Doyle is a fan.
No.
He did improve. He did improve, and the goal in that Venezuela game was really nice. It was a nice sequence, and even moments in this game when he comes off the bench in the Costa Rica game, I should say, there are moments from him where he's injecting a little bit of pace, but I think positionally, out of possession, he doesn't do a great deal, which is surprising because one of the things I'd read from him at Newell's Old Boys was his work rate out of possession. I didn't really see that at all over the two matches. And you consider the players that he's up against in that area of the pitch. He needed a lights out man of the match game in both matches to move the needle in any way, and he didn't produce that. So it wouldn't shock me if we never see Milhevic again in a US shirt. This might have been a one-off.
On grass, maybe on a hard court in five-a-side somewhere, though, right?
Maybe.
Yeah,
There
Quebec
is,
Civic Centre.
just to be clear, when I say no as to the question of is he the worst player, that is not because I thought he was particularly positive. It's because I have seen worse, infamously so. But yeah, I thought he. It sounds also like from the sideline reporting from Melissa Ortiz that Luna would have started the first game but was carrying a knock, which is why Milhevic gets that start. And so I think seen through that lens, I think I initially had an assumption that, like, oh, he must be bringing something in training. There must be sort of spots that Pochettino was liking. And I think maybe now in reality, I see it more as like, well, Luna couldn't go, so here's your next most likely playmaker. Let's see what he can do. And I don't think he covered himself in glory, even if he does get that goal in the first game. In this one, I thought he was okay, but again, not really like elevating the performances. And so I think given the kind of negative from the first game, I'm a bit more stocked down on him overall. And then the last one for me in terms of neutral to negative is Zach Steffen, only because, to the point Graham already made, it's again, similar to Miles Robinson, exactly what we know of Zach Steffen. He can make those big saves. He can make those big reflex saves and sort of lead by example, conduct himself well in traffic. I don't remember any like obvious moments of him flapping at a ball or miscontrolling, but then there is the distribution thing. And so in the end, it's sort of like we know what he brings, but he doesn't bring like consistency in that distribution we would like to see in the way that I think he did maybe at earlier points, especially when he's with Dusseldorf. I remember his distribution being on point, and I just think some of it was slacking there. I think there's still the kind of question as to like what is the ceiling and how like consistent can he be. So I'm less optimistic about Steffen going forward for the U.S., but also won't be surprised if he is in the March camp. And then positives, Graham mentioned most of them. I just want to like emphasize how much I enjoyed DeJuan Jones, how well I think he handled multiple assignments in different ways, how I think he was really good in possession. He has the assist for the Ajaman goal that, again, I don't know who he was aiming for there, but either way, it's still a really good Trivela. I thought he was pretty tidy. I thought he was pretty interesting in his take-ons and his decision as to when to take people on versus when to stay back versus when to kind of move centrally and help with possession. So he's another one that I was very heartened by in his performances.
I agree with the Jones assessment there, Taylor. I thought there was more kind of stillness to his play, which I actually mean as a compliment, because with Jones I often feel like he rushes decisions and he wants to do everything so quickly, and in this game there was a bit more composure and calmness on the ball, which was important because obviously he was pushing into that central midfield unit. So I agree, he's come out of this camp pretty well.
It's the Messi when he first goes to Miami thing, right? Saying like everyone's trying to do too much too quickly and everyone's just got to slow down and pick their moments. Maybe DeJuan Jones read that and thought, like, yeah, I'm going to work on that and see what happens. And I did see that same stillness, which wasn't a negative in this game.
Excellent stuff. All right, finally, we have 6 windows left before the World Cup. Far too many, we're all agreed there.
That's crazy.
Next up, we have, of
that
course,
is
the
crazy.
It is, right? It is a little bit.
That's terrifying.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
One of which being, Taylor, the March window with CONCACAF Nations League finals. The US, of course, 3-time defending champs there. We've got Panama up next in LA. All those games are in LA at SoFi Stadium. The other semi being Mexico and Canada to meet them potentially in the final. Taylor, my final question. I am David Beckham peeking through the door and saying, be honest. Mm-hmm. How much material impact does January camp have on that window and the other 5 going forward?
Minimal, I think, but some, and more than I think I would have said about past January camps. Like, I don't know if we even talked about January camp at this time last year for myriad reasons, but this time around, I think there's a chance that it does, because, like, I've been curious who is the left back if Jedi Robinson can't go, if he's injured or whatever the situation may be, who can do a similar job. I'm not saying DeJuan Jones can do even a close approximation of what Jedi will bring, but I think we have now another option at left back who can attack but can stay back but can move centrally. I think he gives you some variety there. So, like, if he's in the March camp, I'm fine with that. I think we saw, like, McGlynn and Luna do well enough. I don't know if they are going to be in consideration for March. I feel like they are more so somebody dropped out, an attacking player dropped out, an attacking midfielder dropped out, so we need to add somebody late. But I think both of them did enough that I would be excited to see them, Diego Luna especially. And then Ajamang is another one who, like, Balogun is, I think, expected to return in February. You never know what happens there. You never know how fit he will be ahead of that March window. If you have him hurt and your only other options are like Pepe and Sargent, I think Ajamang gets called in as a third choice option. If one of those two is hurt, maybe he's closer to starting. I think there's a lot of maybes in there and conditionals in there, but that's what January camp is meant to be. It's meant to give you a greater idea of your depth and potential areas of strength and vulnerability, and I think Ajamang gave us another point of strength in the attack.
Yeah, and Poch doesn't know these players in the way that Berhalter would have coming into that job. So it's entirely new for Pochettino. Pochettino is having a fresh look at these players. My kind of vibes-y prediction from this camp is there will be at least one player from this camp. And I'm not talking about Tim Ream or like a backup goalkeeper. I'm talking about one of the sort of younger players. I think there'll be at least one player from this camp that makes the World Cup roster, is my sort of intangible, abstract prediction. So there you go.
Very good. All right, let's leave it there for this episode. Thank you very much indeed, Taylor Rockwell, for all your USMNT expertise for now and going forward, sir.
My pleasure. Go USA, and Pochettino, I hope you made it in time.
Indeed. Graham Ruthven, thank you very much. We're glad you made it in time to this podcast. We're glad you stay up late to watch these games. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
And listener, thank you the mostest. Without you, there wouldn't be us. We appreciate you. We'll be back on the feed very shortly. But for now, bye!